The emergency sirens refused to stop that bright Monday morning. Ambulances poured into the city hospital one after another, their flashing lights painting the walls red and blue as frightened families crowded the entrance. Doctors sprinted through the halls, nurses rushed stretchers toward the emergency ward, and every second seemed to decide whether someone would live or die. Then, in the middle of the overwhelming chaos, the hospital director shouted a question that silenced everyone nearby. Who saved all 57 victims? The answer came without hesitation. The nurse you suspended. Before we continue, if you believe kindness deserves a second chance and that good people should never be forgotten, please like this video, comment where you're watching from, share this story with someone who believes in compassion, and subscribe to Kindness Tales Story for more emotional stories that restore faith in humanity. Only a week before that unforgettable morning, Nurse Maren Ellis had quietly walked out of the hospital carrying a small cardboard box filled with her belongings. After 12 years of loyal service, she had been suspended following an accusation that she had ignored hospital procedures during an emergency. The truth was far more complicated. Maren had broken protocol to save the life of a young child whose heart had suddenly stopped when no physician was immediately available. Although the child survived, an internal investigation focused more on paperwork than compassion. The hospital director, Victor Harlow, eager to protect the hospital's reputation, suspended Maren before listening to the complete story. Staff members were shocked, but few dared to challenge the decision. Maren returned to her small apartment with a heavy heart. Nursing had never been just a career for her. It was a promise she had made years earlier after losing her own mother because medical help arrived too late. Every patient reminded her why she had chosen this difficult path. Even after the suspension, she woke early every morning out of habit, wondering whether her patients were recovering and whether the elderly man in room 308 had finally smiled again. The city seemed unusually peaceful that morning until disaster struck. A crowded commuter train derailed after a bridge support unexpectedly collapsed. Within minutes, dozens of injured passengers were being transported to every nearby hospital. The emergency department quickly became overwhelmed. Stretchers lined every hallway. Supplies disappeared faster than they could be replaced. Several staff members were stuck in traffic caused by the accident, leaving the hospital desperately understaffed. From her apartment only a few blocks away, Maren heard the endless sirens. She switched on the television and immediately understood the scale of the tragedy. Although officially suspended, she did not hesitate. She grabbed her nursing shoes, tied back her hair, and ran toward the hospital she still considered home. When she arrived, security guards initially stopped her because her staff access had been disabled. But inside the emergency entrance, panic had replaced procedure. A senior physician recognized her and urgently waved her in. There was no time for arguments, paperwork, or pride. Lives were slipping away every minute. Maren instantly began organizing the overflowing emergency area. Instead of waiting for instructions, she calmly assessed every patient, identifying who required immediate surgery, who needed blood transfusions, and who could safely wait. Her voice remained steady even while surrounded by fear. Families who moments earlier had been crying uncontrollably suddenly found themselves listening to her reassuring words. Her confidence spread through the exhausted medical team. As more victims arrived, Maren noticed that several newer nurses were becoming overwhelmed by the horrifying injuries. Rather than criticizing them, she guided each one with patience, assigning simple but essential tasks that restored order to the chaos. She reminded everyone to focus on one patient at a time, one heartbeat at a time, one life at a time. Hours passed without anyone realizing how exhausted they had become. Maren barely stopped to drink water. She moved from one bed to another, comforting frightened children, calming anxious parents, helping surgeons prepare emergency operations, and even donating blood when supplies temporarily ran low because her blood type matched an injured teenager fighting for his life. Outside, reporters gathered as news of the disaster spread across the country. They expected stories of tragedy, yet inside the hospital something remarkable was happening. Despite receiving 57 critically injured patients in only a few hours, not a single one was lost. Medical professionals later admitted that such an outcome seemed almost impossible considering the circumstances. Meanwhile, Director Victor Harlow finally arrived after attending an emergency government meeting. Expecting complete disorder, he instead found an emergency department operating with surprising coordination. Doctors moved confidently. Nurses communicated efficiently. Patients were being stabilized one after another. Confused, he demanded to know who had taken charge. The room fell silent. Finally, the chief surgeon answered with tired but proud eyes. "The nurse you suspended." Victor turned toward the treatment area and saw Marin kneeling beside an elderly woman, gently holding her hand while monitoring her breathing. Her uniform was stained, her face showed complete exhaustion, and her hands trembled from hours of non-stop work. Yet she continued smiling softly at every frightened patient. For the first time in many years, Victor felt genuine shame. He remembered how quickly he had judged her. He remembered ignoring the voices of nurses who had defended her. He realized that leadership without compassion had nearly cost the hospital its greatest caregiver. Later that evening, after every patient had been safely transferred to recovery or surgery, the exhausted staff gathered quietly in the hospital corridor. There were tears, hugs, and overwhelming relief. Families embraced doctors and nurses with gratitude impossible to express through words alone. Victor slowly approached Marin. Before dozens of employees, he admitted that he had made a terrible mistake. He publicly apologized for suspending her without hearing the complete truth. He immediately canceled her suspension, offered her full reinstatement, and announced that she would lead a new emergency response training program so every future nurse could learn from her calm leadership and extraordinary compassion. Marin accepted the apology with remarkable humility. She explained that she had never returned for recognition, revenge, or even her job. She had returned because people were suffering, and helping others was simply who she was. Those simple words spread throughout the hospital faster than any official announcement. Weeks later, investigators officially cleared Marin of all wrongdoing in the earlier incident involving the child she had saved. The hospital also revised several outdated emergency policies, recognizing that compassion and professional judgment should never be punished when they save lives. The 57 survivors slowly recovered. Some returned to visit the hospital carrying flowers, handwritten letters, and photographs showing their recovery. Parents introduced their children to the nurse who had comforted them during the darkest moments of their lives. Elderly patients hugged her with grateful tears. Young adults who had nearly died promised to spend their lives helping others because one stranger had first helped them. Marin never considered herself a hero. She simply believed every person deserved someone who refused to give up on them. Her story reminded the entire city that true greatness is rarely found in titles, expensive offices, or positions of authority. It is found in ordinary people who quietly choose kindness when no one is watching and who continue doing the right thing even after being treated unfairly. If this story has touched your heart so far, please take a moment to like this video, share it with your family and friends, leave a comment, and subscribe to Kindness Tales Story. Your support helps more inspiring stories of hope and kindness reach people who need them most. Special request: before this story ends, please comment with one word: kindness. Let's fill the comments with hope and remind the world that compassion still exists. As the sun began to set over the city that unforgettable day, the hospital windows reflected a golden light across the quiet recovery rooms. Inside those rooms lay 57 people who had been given another chance at life because one nurse refused to let disappointment define her. Instead of holding on to bitterness, she chose service. Instead of seeking revenge, she chose mercy. Instead of walking away, she walked toward those who needed her most. Sometimes the greatest miracle is not found in extraordinary talent but in an ordinary heart that never stops caring. And long after the headlines disappeared, people would still remember the answer to the director's unforgettable question. Who saved all 57 victims? It was the nurse who had been suspended, the woman whose kindness proved stronger than judgment, whose courage outshined authority, and whose compassion reminded everyone that one selfless person truly can change countless lives forever.